To animate a hierarchy, we'll need to first establish the locations and orientations of each object's pivot point. Remember, the pivot point is the center of object transforms. It's the anchor around which the object will rotate. Right now, if we select any one of these objects, we will see the axis tripod is located at the center of the geometry. To get a good rotation, we'll want to move the pivot points to the center of these joints. Right now, if I try to do a rotation, it's not going to work correctly. I'll undo that with Control-Z. We looked at how to move pivot points earlier in the course. Let's review that really quickly, and then we'll look at how to rotate pivot points. I'll select both of those shoulders with Control-Click, go to the Move tool, then go over to the Command panel and choose the Hierarchy panel, and activate Effect Pivot Only. The pivot point may or may not display immediately, but if you just move one of them a little bit, then it'll refresh the display. To do this most accurately, I'll do it from a side view. Go to Alt-W, get in close on that left view, and position both of those pivot points at the center of this sphere. Then go to the front view, and we can see that they both need to be moved in closer towards the center of the character. I'll expand that front view with Alt-W, select just one of them, and then move it. Go and select the other one and move it. Now I've got the positions of those pivot points established. Next, we want to deal with the rotations. I'll turn off Effect Pivot Only for a minute and go to Rotate tool. And if we look at this, we can see that the Rotate gizmo is not aligned with the object. We'll get best results with rotations if the pivot point is aligned with the object. We can see this even really clearly if we go up to our reference coordinate systems and choose Local Space. That's the space of the selected object. And we don't see any change in the orientation of the Rotate gizmo because the pivot point for that object is currently aligned with the world. If we choose World and Local, we don't see any change. Okay, I'll go back to the View Coordinate System, and then with the Rotate tool active, turn on Effect Pivot Only. And I want to snap rotate this because I know that it only needs to rotate by 10 degrees. I'll turn on Angle Snaps, and then just rotate that by 10 degrees. We can see a number 10 there on that little heads-up display. And now the pivot point is aligned, as you can see. I'll exit out of Effect Pivot Only. And if we switch back to local coordinates, we can see that the Rotate gizmo is now aligned. And now we'll get a much more predictable rotation. We can do the same thing over here on the other shoulder, but I want to do something clever, which is to make it so that I can cause the arms to both go upward by rotating both in the same axis at the same time. If I Control select them both right now, and up here I'm using Use Pivot Point Center as the center for rotations, and I rotate them both in the y-axis, they both rotate the same way. I want them to rotate in opposite directions. I'll undo that. And to accomplish that opposite rotation, I'll select the other object, turn on Effect Pivot Only, and I may need to just wiggle a little bit to make that refresh. And what I'd like to achieve here is inverting that pivot point, make it going the other direction. And to achieve that, I'm going to rotate it in X. So this is the X-axis, the red circle. I'm going to rotate it exactly 180 degrees. And what I want to achieve here is that the y-axis of the pivot point is pointing forward. That's the green arrow. And the z-axis pointing downward. That's the blue arrow. And if I select both of the shoulders by Control-clicking, we can see that they have different orientations. Okay, so I'll just clean this one up, go back over here, and then just rotate that over by 10 degrees so that it's aligned with the geometry. Turn off Effect Pivot Only. Select both of the shoulder objects, and in local coordinate space, using Pivot Point Center, if I rotate in the y-axis here, they rotate in opposite directions. All right, pretty cool. In this lesson, I'm not going to move and rotate the pivot points for every object because that would make the movie a bit too long. You can go ahead and move and rotate those pivot points yourself, or if you have the exercise files, you can load up the next exercise file in sequence, and that'll have all of the pivot points positioned and aligned.